Hi everyone. One of the key issues of the fallout from mass immigration is the lack of integration. Today, the Immigrant Council of Ireland held a conference in Dublin, and the key aim of this conference was to speak to the lack of integration and to work on a national strategy for integration. Of course, we've seen over the past number of years a massive increase in the population in Ireland. Of course, mass immigration benefits the big corporations, the globalists, at the expense of ordinary people. And of course, we've seen the serious pressure on under-resourced basic services in our society in terms of housing, access to the health service, and many more issues in terms of education and so forth. But of course, this benefits the big employers to keep wages down. And fundamentally, many of those global corporations are pushing it. And of course, the media classes and the political classes in Ireland are fully in bed with this agenda. But today, the discussion was about working towards a national strategy for integration. Now, wait for it. Apparently, according to the Immigrant Council of Ireland, they said that the government must improve communication with communities ahead of new migrants coming into those communities. Well, absolutely correct, but it goes much deeper than that, because essentially power must come from communities in terms of democracy, where it starts is in communities where people are supposed to have a say in the policy of what happens around them. And then specifically, that would work at a national level too, which is in the Irish Constitution. But of course, this has been ignored by the top-down diktats that are issued on communities. And they also stated that they should empower communities with resources and information. Well, absolutely, resources should be there. But of course, we've seen these issues that doesn't impact the very wealthy in Irish society, and also many of those liberal elites and many of those who push in the identity politics, who proclaim to stand up for workers' rights, but are actually working at the behest of their globalist bosses in terms of pushing the mass immigration agenda. Now, Colin Brophy, who's the Junior Minister for Migration, Fine Gael of course, has said that this will be in the programme for government. It's actually already, he stated, in the programme for government. I did a video on that a number of months ago. You can look back at it through one of my video reels, and speaking about the programme for government, and he says that it should be looking for ongoing needs and emerging needs in supporting migrants' integration while meeting the demands and opportunities facing our society over the next decade. Isn't that interesting? Ongoing needs and emerging needs. Well, of course, Fine Gael have done absolutely nothing to serve the needs of ordinary people. Completely sold out the interests of ordinary people, along with Fianna Fáil and their Lowry lackey independents, and of course the Labour Party and many of those other parties on the now opposition, inverted commas, benches in Dáil Éireann, who are fully on board with this agenda. But of course, they're talking about strengthening engagement. It's not about strengthening democracy and bringing power back to our communities. No, it's not. It's really fundamentally about dictating policies from a top-down ivory tower that many of these elitists are in. And also, this is interesting because the whole idea of having strategies on immigration and integration hasn't been anything new. It's gone on for years and years and years and basically sent lip service. The 2020 strategy said that they should look for a whole of government approach to promote the integration of all migrants legally residing in the state, to enhance inclusion, equity and diversity. This is just nonsense, because we've seen these top-down diktats everywhere. We've seen the heavy-handedness of the police to work at the behest of the state, to force many migrants into working-class communities, and of course communities that are completely disenfranchised and left behind because of successive governments, and of course the European Union neoliberal agenda, where it's all about privatising whatever moves, especially when it comes to basic public services. And of course, they had action points. The action points were to work towards citizenship, residency, political participation, which is important as well. But of course, this is nothing new, and this is what they're trying to push forward. But in the context of integration, it is important, because when any country you travel to or come to, you have to respect the history, the heritage, the laws of those lands, and which is vitally important. But of course, in Ireland, they're trying to hide and disguise our history and our heritage, and making people feel ashamed of this. But this is the hegemony that they're pushing right across Europe through the globalist agenda, where you have no attachments to your home, no attachment to your place, and it's easier to divide people and control essentially the masses by dividing people and having people with no attachment to their home place and in terms of their history and heritage. And that's why it's critically important to retain this more than ever and keep speaking out in your conversations about how proud we are of where we're from in terms of our country and our cities and our towns and villages up and down our great nation. But also what's important, we've seen the lack of community cohesion and the breaking of the social contract because of all these involvements of the top-down diktats that come from Brussels. And of course the Irish government have sold off many of our rights to Europe. 70% of our legislation comes now from the European Commission. I've spoken to many videos about that in terms of how it works. But what's fundamentally important here is that the political opposition and the government have signed up along to the EU Migration Pact and are fully signed up members to this EU top-down agenda and more centralised power grab by these, inverted commas, elitists in Europe. And of course, as I've said, this is all a big globalist agenda pushed by people like Peter Sutherland, the World Economic Forum and many more others again. So they'll be funding these NGOs, stroke government organisations, that's what they should be fundamentally called, who push this agenda through across society. And of course this will get a lot of airtime and how it should work, and everybody should be working together, not against each other and all that sort of stuff. But essentially it benefits the very wealthy in society and essentially is a way to control the masses and to censor them to a massive extent about speaking about these real issues. Real integration comes from communities and people working together if the resources are there and available for people. But unfortunately we don't live in a society like that. We only live in a society that benefits the very top of society in terms of the very wealthy, and it shows you really fundamentally the class perspective and system that we live in when you see this happening. But of course many of those who proclaim to stand up for the working class are the ones now shouting and roaring all kinds of abuse at working class people, while at the same time division and hatred will lead nowhere. Fundamentally it's about people uniting about what's going on and fundamentally putting the interests of our people, our country first in terms of bringing democracy back to our communities, so we serve the needs of our citizens in terms of having a dignified existence, a right to a home, a decent health service, a decent job opportunities, and of course a right to decent education, where you see at the moment a young 14-year-old girl outside the gates of Dáil Éireann for a 50-hour sleep out, Cara Darmody rather, who is because of lack of access to special needs assessment, which the government are breaking the law. But again, they'll move on regardless, and ordinary people will move on and not be overly concerned by what's going on. But essentially this is the oppression and the oppressive nature of the system that we're in. But ordinary people should be uniting against what's going on and against those who push those policies and claim they're interested in integration or humanitarian interventions when so many people are dying in the streets of Dublin. A couple of days ago a man was found dead outside Store Street Garda Station who has been sleeping on the streets of Dublin. This is the inhumanity that they're trying to drive down through the neoliberal agenda and through more of the top-down policies that are going to devastate the lives of ordinary people. So the people to be aware of what's going on. Please share my videos, please subscribe to my channel. Let's get the real news out to what's going on in Irish society and stop falling for the spin that they portray as the news, or so-called the real information. So thanks from Dublin. Slán, I'll see you all soon. Take care, bye bye.